Hang on. Order. I call Matt Warman to move the motion.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I beg to move that this House has considered superfast broadband rollout. And those of you that had the pleasure of being at Prime Minister's questions earlier on today will no doubt think that we have already considered superfast broadband rollout, because it was by far the most popular question for people to ask the Prime Minister. I think the issue that we discuss today is by far the most important infrastructure programme, Mr. Chairman, that we will consider in our lifetimes, in fact. There has been much discussion of new train lines. In fact, over the last 5 years, the progress that we have made on superfast broadband is immense. And I do want to begin by covering some of the progress that we have made in the last few years. And I have intentionally asked for this House to consider superfast broadband rollout rather than simply the rural broadband programme, because we need to acknowledge that there are serious problems in cities as well as in rural areas. And while geographically it is the rural broadband programme that remains an enormous task, because it covers something like 40% of the area of the country, it is also the huge numbers that live often with very slow connections in cities that I would ask us to consider today. But if we go back to 2010, shortly after the election of the coalition government, Jeremy Hunt announced that, the then Culture Secretary, announced that we would have the best broadband in Europe. And as by 2015, and as a journalist covering this, I remember being convinced that if we were to have that, we would have it only by fiddling the figures. In fact, it turns out to be the case. in fact, it turns out to be the case that measured against comparable nations such as Germany, such as France, then Britain has indeed made incredible progress. And more to the point, we have by far the most competitive marketplace when it comes to broadband. So our constituents, for the service that they get, are paying a very good... I would be delighted to give way.
I thank the honourable gentleman very much for giving way. As he will know, the Public Accounts Committee has looked at this in detail and no doubt will be looking at it again. I warn the Minister. But does he not agree that he talked about competition being good, but there are technologies based in my constituency and around the country that would like to break into this market but find there are barriers, partly because of the way the rural broadband programme was rolled out? Would you not agree that the Minister needs to look at this very seriously again?
Well, I'm delighted to hear that the Public Accounts Committee is interested in looking at this again, and I know the Minister will agree with me. I think that it is, of course, important that we are genuinely technology neutral when it comes to assessing what the best way of getting from 90 to 95 to 100% is going to be. And that brings me on to my second point, which is to look at where we have got to now and where we will be within the next 5 years or so to get to from 95 to 99 and then up maybe to 100%. And I think I should begin by saying that in my own county of Lincolnshire, BT's rollout is not only ahead of schedule, but also £7 million under budget. So I may not be the only person expressing a view on BT in this debate, but I should say that there are some examples where they have delivered the programme that they have been asked to. Where we have a challenge, I would suggest, is when it comes to delivering the next stage of that rollout, because we must, I would be delighted.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend on this issue, but I'm concerned that what we are talking about is 95% up to 95%, not past 95%. In other words, you are asking for something which is possibly delivered, but probably not delivered in quite a lot of your constituencies.
I would agree, and it is interesting to note that the target that we will have in Lincolnshire is 86%, which obviously is some way below 95%. In Herefordshire, I believe the target that they will end up with is something like 40% for Superfast. So I think various rural counties have big issues. I'd be delighted to give away.
My friend and I have the pleasure of representing the east of Lincolnshire, which stretches from the sweeping coastline of Lincolnshire across the rich agricultural fanes and the rolling hills of the Wolds. But the only cloud in the sky is the fact that in my constituency, BT tells me, with some pride it seems, that overall constituency coverage in Louth and Horncastle is 22%. So please, when we talk about 95%, that is very much an aspiration in Louth and Horncastle.
I'm delighted that my honourable friend reminds me of the variation even within BT's own performance within Lincolnshire, and it is that variation that it is crucial that we discuss today. The second point that I would consider, though, is that when it comes to talking about moving from 95 to 99%, BT is by no means the only game in town. Contracts have already been signed with companies such as GigaClear in other parts of the country, and I would hope that members who ask themselves how their own counties can get the best out of BT would look at those other contractors where they have been able to remind BT that there are other options available, because that seems to produce sometimes a marked improvement in performance. However, the other issue that will take us from 95 to 99% remains, for the first time in this debate, I think, the provision of 4G and subsequently 5G. And the two things I would like to achieve from the many members who I know have put in to speak in this debate subsequently is to ask ourselves, how do we get the best out of the contracts that we have already, and how do we apply maximum pressure to best fund the rollout, which will be expensive but more than worthwhile to go from 95 to 99. I would contend that a big part of that is not just fibre broadband, but should be 4G and 5G. And there is a place, I think, for satellite broadband in some of this. There is a final point, which is also the fact that BT and its relationship with BT Openreach is currently being considered. I know there is a range of views in this House. I would urge only that the competition authorities look seriously at whether the best interests of the consumer are served by BT's current relationship with Openreach. I look forward to other people expressing different views over the course of this debate. The thing that I would close with, however, is that when we talk endlessly about the vital importance of infrastructure, it is very often roads and railways that we emphasise. When I talk to constituents, it is almost always broadband that comes up as the most important infrastructure project that they would like to see getting faster speeds, and that means better than up to in their own constituencies. In their own houses. I'd be delighted to work.
The honourable for giving way, and at the risk of turning this into a Lincolnshire-only debate. Don't worry, it won't be. Important and desirable as that would be, he's making a great case for the fact, as we all know, shown by the number of attendees in this debate, that broadband is now absolutely essential. And a constituent of mine at a parish council meeting last night, a parish councillor, told one of my district councillors that her children want to move from Wilsford to Sleaford as there's better broadband there. They have to link to the school computer for homework and they can't get it. Does he agree with me, in fact, that this issue is so important now because we simply cannot conduct our lives and everything that we have to do to interact with government and everybody else without access to good broadband? And that is why it is so important, not just in constituencies in urban areas, but particularly for constituents who live in rural Britain.
My honourable friend preempts my final point, which is the reason this is such an important project is not simply that it allows our constituents to watch all the stuff that is associated with broadband, all the entertainment from the BBC and all the gaming that we hear so much about. It is in fact also because it allows the business of government to become so much more efficient. So whether that is telehealth or whether that is rural farm payments as well, I'd be delighted.
He's talked about the infrastructure. As one gets to London and Surrey, where there's enormous efforts there, it is the other infrastructure that causes the difficulty, the railway and the roads, etc. Has my honourable friend noted in looking at the BT contracts that they do seem to be selectable blind-eyed? So when it becomes difficult, they work round it, and we're left with islands and pockets, which should have been picked up in the contracts.
Well, I think my honourable friend raises an excellent point, which is that we must, when we consider how state aid works, go to the areas that need the help rather than subsidise what is a commercial rollout that would take place nonetheless. So the construction of those contracts is absolutely crucial, and the expertise within councils to make sure that they get the best out of those contracts is also absolutely crucial. I know that a number of colleagues would like to come in on that point later on in the debate.
Securing the debate. He mentioned earlier the question of urban hotspots, and could I just press him a little bit further on that? Because often the most isolated areas are those where there actually is good broadband coverage, where the commercial contracts have worked, but little bits have been left, often residential areas, that we can't even get the commercial firms to even be transparent about where those areas are, let alone do what's necessary. So would you agree with me that what's needed is a lot more transparency and a lot more coordination between operators and often with local authorities as well?
I would absolutely agree, and what I would hope that this House will do is look forward to the next couple of months, where we will see more detailed maps of Phase 2 rollouts, and that will allow us to look into Phase 3, that will give constituents some of the clarity that we so urgently need, so that you can say to people, we know that superfast broadband is finally coming to your area, but it won't be here for another 2 or 3 or however many years. And that will at least allow some communities to be able to make up their own minds whether they would like to perhaps put their own money into helping jump the queue, or whether they are able to content themselves with that wait. Because I think it is the lack of clarity that has been so damaging, and is why our own post bags are often so full, because people feel that there is often an update on a website that says that your cabinet will be upgraded within the next 3 months, and it's said that for the last 6 months, if not longer, which is deeply unhelpful to us, to our councils that are trying to oversee this, and also to BT itself, I think. So we should acknowledge that sometimes the companies facilitating this have been their own worst enemies.
I'm very grateful that the member, I congratulate him too on securing the debate. And it's always interesting to see when a journalist comes into the House and speaks with authority on a subject, which doesn't always happen. But he referred to state aid, and there's a really important point here, because there's a big concern expressed by many competitors of BT's that when every single contract was won by one player, there's no clear, transparent evidence that state aid wasn't used basically to advance BT's original intentions and not to meet the real needs of the country.
The Right Honourable Member makes a powerful case for transparency, I think, which is a key point. But also, many members have questioned whether, outside this debate, whether the process that we went down with BD UK is necessarily the way that we would go if we were to run the process again, or indeed if it is the way that we should go when we think about further phases. And I think that is an important part of this debate as well. But the most important factor remains that we should not allow our foot collectively to be taken off the gas allow anyone for a moment to think that our commitment to getting Britain from 95 to 99% and beyond is not something that we are all, on a cross-party basis, I would hope, absolutely committed to doing, and doing in the best possible way for both the taxpayer and for our constituents. My only final point, before I allow the many members who have put in to speak, is to say that what we have achieved over the last 5 years is remarkable. The risk, I would suggest, is that in looking at the final 5%, we fail to actually close not just the gap between 95 and 99, but we leave those tiny knot spots that will effectively rule themselves out of serious coverage forever, rather than be part of a coordinated, serious national programme. So I hope that what we will hear in the subsequent debate is a serious case to acknowledge all the best that BT has done and try to make that best practice and standard practice across the country, that we will hear a serious case for continued ongoing investment in this programme, and that we will hear a serious case for no community to be left behind. Thank you.
Just before I call the next member, just some guidance. We have many speakers, 26 speakers have put in today. It's about just over 70 minutes to allocate to those speakers, so I know members will be mindful of each other, given also there are 3 front bench spokesmen to speak later for the other remaining 30 minutes. In addition, interventions should be short, and be mindful that if you do intervene perhaps more than once, you may slip down the list. I'm not sure, but you may. And also thank you to Mr. Phillips, who has withdrawn his name, having made the intervention, which will allow other members a little bit more time, notwithstanding his Lincolnshire roots. So the question is that this House has considered science and research in the UK and regional economies. That is incorrect. The question is that this House has considered... Thank you, clerks. The question is, I'll take full blame, that this House has considered science and research in the UK regional economies. That is also incorrect. Can I have the right wording, please? Thank you. It is about superfast broadband rule, and it's needed in Shropshire as well. Thank you. I apologise, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much indeed. The question is that this House has considered superfast broadband rollout, and I'd like to call Albert Owen. Thank you.
Mr. Pritchard, it's a pleasure to be under your chairmanship, and I know you were correcting the clerks there, because I was in the chair this morning, and the debate that you alluded to I chaired earlier on this morning, so I was a little bit concerned that we hadn't finished it. But the serious point, I congratulate the honourable member for Boston and Skegness. He talked about rural issues not being the main issue, and I accept that. But when you're on a periphery area and a rural area, you have a double whammy. You know, you're out on the periphery, and the choice is a great place to live, but businesses are complaining that it's not a great place to do business. And I speak on behalf of businesses, on behalf of tourism, on behalf of many. We're not a semi-detached area. I believe Ynysmone is the heart of the British Isles, and very close to Ireland, very close to England, and very close to, well, south of Scotland, so in the centre of the British Isles. But when you're a business, you are in many ways London-centric, very much Cardiff-centric when it comes to Wales, so we do feel left out. But I do welcome the government's progress, as has been indicated, but I'm afraid I don't think that progress has been sufficient in areas on the periphery of the United Kingdom. We need a... I will.
He's talked about the peripheral areas. A peripheral area in Europe, islands between Scotland and Iceland, are the Faroe Islands. And each and every house in the Faroe Islands has got wired broadband to that house. It's a choice the government made. That has happened. I would just suggest to him that if we made those choices, we too could achieve that. But in the meantime, 4G has surely got a huge part to play in what will be inevitable continuing knot spots in the UK. Not perhaps the Faroe Islands, but in the UK.
I'm grateful to the honourable member, fellow Ireland member, who makes the case. And the Faroe Islands is a great example of something I learnt today when he mentioned that. But it's a good example where there is the political will, then there is a way of doing it. And in the 21st century, which I will argue, it's something that it should be a necessity, not a luxury to rural areas. but a necessity. Now, there are some good working practices, and I know the Minister in previous debates has highlighted this. The Welsh Assembly has a very good working relationship with the UK Government, the European Union, in delivering superfast broadband in Wales, and that has working well to an extent. But I will give, on the last time, because I'm conscious of so many members.
I'm very grateful to the member for giving way. In terms of the relationship between the Welsh Government and BT and the way in which that's worked in Wales, is he proud of the fact that Wales has 9 of the worst 20 performing constituencies in the entire country listed as not having any broadband connectivity whatsoever, despite the fact that the Welsh Government levered in over 50% of additional funding from Europe?
If I get the opportunity, I'll come to some of the figures in comparing nations and within Wales, because he is absolutely right. There are some poor performing areas in Wales, as there are in the rest of the United Kingdom. But I do want to concentrate on the rural periphery. And I do understand that he's a very close neighbour of mine, that there is issues with rollout in his constituency. But I do want to concentrate on the second-class service that periphery areas are obtaining, not just in, and I'll come to this, not just in broadband, but also in mobile connectivity, as we've heard. And this is essential for competition, it's essential for enterprise, and it's essential for accessing public services. The limited, slow access that we have for broadband in periphery areas goes against the government's policies of increasing online resources for public services. They say, on the one hand, we need to have it. Farmers in my areas are always complaining they have difficulty in submitting their tax returns, for example. Government's encouraging them on the one hand, and the department to ensure that they have tax done online, but they can't get that connectivity. And I'm sure they're getting fined as a consequence of being late on that. So, you know, we have a great example of this. We heard the Faroe Islands, but in the whole of the United Kingdom, the whole of Great Britain and Ireland, in the 20th century, the post office was able to deliver the same quality of phone lines to every house in the United Kingdom, regardless of where it was located. So we have a great example of that. Now, the Minister will be pleased to hear I'm not advocating full renationalisation of all the telecom systems, but I am making the point, and boldly, that the market, and I shouldn't laugh at this part, I know he's laughing at the first part, but he shouldn't laugh, the market is letting areas of the United Kingdom down. And that's why this debate is so important, that we want to see a one nation. We all hear about it, we're all agreed, and we use that terminology. But when it comes to telecommunications, we are seeing a two-nation developing here in the United Kingdom. So I'm advocating that the market is not working for parts of Britain. And I know we have the Minister has been in his post for some time, and I welcome him back to his post. And he's heard these arguments. But I want to hear something different from him in his reply today. I want to hear some answers. I don't want to hear blaming of the devolved administrations or the local authority partnerships. I want to hear what the government is going to do to close down these black spots in the areas. They're not spots, they're black spots, because they have very little or none no mobile coverage of speed and no broadband coverage of speed. So I want to put the case for that here today, because these peripheral areas, let's remember, pay more for their petrol and for their diesel. They pay more for their utilities and their gas and electricity. They pay more for goods in many ways, and the wages are often lower than in other parts of the United Kingdom. And we talk about smart meters. And I was on the Energy Select Committee, and I asked the companies who have been delivering this on behalf of the government. They're talking about 95% coverage, we've just heard. I can guess where those 5% not spots are going to be from day one. They will be the periphery areas. They'll be the thing. And I'm saying to the government, and I know this is not the Minister's brief, but we should be starting from some of those rural areas when we do pilot schemes, that we should start from periphery areas and roll out the other way, not just what the companies want when it comes to the number of people living in those areas. These aren't left-wing views, these aren't liberal views, they are the views of many ordinary constituents of mine, including the Countryside Alliance, who have lobbied me, including the National Farmers Union and Farmers Union of Wales. And the Minister should take note of not just what we're saying here on behalf of our constituents, but what those groups are saying collectively as well. They are making the case to improve the commerce of their area. Now, the previous Secretary of State, the Right Honourable Member for Bromsgrove, talked tough with the mobile companies and with the broadband companies, but he failed to deliver. I think he let them off the hook in the last in the last Parliament, to be absolutely frank, because I don't see much improvement of speeds and access. I do hear of goalposts being moved from the government. The previous Economic Secretary was very good at giving us updates in the House, but all he was doing was delaying and pushing 15 back to 16, back to 17. And the mobile phone companies now in particular are repeating that mantra very much in the thing. So I realise, Mr Pritchard, that we're slow on, that we're short of time. But these slow speeds need to be improved quickly. And just to help the Honourable Member for Aberconwy on some figures, because there are parts of Wales that are holding behind. Wales has a superfast broadband of 60% on average. That includes the large conurbations of the cities. Northern Ireland is exceptionally well. It has 94% of superfast. So it's not an issue that is just that periphery areas cannot deliver where the political will is there. The Northern Ireland Government Assembly has proven that it can be done. England has 80% and Scotland has some 64%. So there is a need across the UK to ensure that we do so. I want to see this happening very quickly. I want to see the BT, the Welsh Government, working with the UK Government and the European Union to ensure we have those funds to happen. And I'll finish on this, because many of the cabinets and many of the exchanges in my constituency do have the facility in it. The infrastructure is there, but it is that last mile. And when it comes to rural areas, it's not mile, it's miles plural. And that is the problem. And many of the commercial companies just don't see the value in doing the rollout from the cabinets, from the exchanges, to the households, to the businesses in my constituency. And I know I speak for many on the periphery and rural areas that we need to have this done as a matter of urgency. In the 21st century, we want to have 21st century access to goods like everybody else in the large towns and cities of the United Kingdom.
Now, I cannot comment on the content of the speech, but I can observe that that speech was 9 minutes long, and I hope perhaps can be avoided in the following speech. Neil Parish.
Thank you very much, Mr Pritchard, and it's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and I thank the Honourable Member for Boston and Skegness for this debate. Lincolnshire is a very hilly part of the world, but probably not quite as hilly as Devon. And certainly the Blackdown Hills, which is very much part of my constituency, we have huge problems of getting broadband out there. And of course, we talk about 95% of broadband delivered to the country. We're just bordering on 50% to the constituency. And most of the Blackdown Hills are not actually getting any broadband at all. We're also getting many villages that are being left out. There is a lack of transparency. There was a confidentiality clause in the last contract that was let by Devon and Somerset. And so, therefore, there are really huge problems. And the present contract, which Devon and Somerset are being asked to sign up to, is BT are asking for an extra £35 million. They're asking for 3 years longer to deliver the broadband, most of which they should have delivered by 2016. What sort of deal is that, Minister? It is no sort of deal whatsoever, because we are being held to ransom for the simple reason that we have state aid rules that only last, the waiving of them, until the end of this month, a few more days, and they're putting the gun to the head of Devon and Somerset, saying if you don't sign, you'll be outside of the state aid rules, and what will happen then? This is wrong. Is absolutely wrong. This company, BT, is a very good company, but it is dominant in the marketplace. And there's very many good parts of the country where they are delivering very good broadband, but there's other parts of the country where they are just not delivering. And what are we doing as a government? What are you doing, Minister, to actually stop it happening? I mean, I have every confidence in you, Minister. I've had many meetings with you. But what I want to see is not warm. What I don't want to see is warm words. I want to actually see action now to make sure that BT deliver, because it's all of our constituents that are put at disadvantages. We've got many farms and businesses which will not get broadband probably until 2020 and beyond. And do the honourable members from all parties in this House, Do they actually want to go around in the 2020 election actually to the villages that have got no broadband and actually face the consequences? Because that is the reality. Because all the time BT is rolling it further back, not further forward, further back. And that is the real issue. So what I would like to see is clear indication from the Minister that if we're going to have this dominant BT in the marketplace, which I've got no problem with, but I do expect the government and ministers to actually make sure that a deal is brought to Devon and Somerset that they can actually sign. Because the other issue for the government, of course, is that Devon and Somerset, some nearly £100 million in total of taxpayers' money from councils and government, would actually, if they did not deliver on that, would actually mean that the government could not deliver its 95% target by 2020. As simple as that, because of the largeness of the scheme. So I would ask, again, that if Devon and Somerset are prepared to sign another contract with BT, that they honour their commitments, they actually deliver the broadband that they've already said, they've actually put in their contributions, which they said they would do, which we've seen no colour of their money yet in their accounts. All of this really does not bode well. And the final point I will make is that Dartmoor and Exmoor now have a new scheme from a company which is delivering it by Wi-Fi, and that looks to be going very quickly. Why has BT, though they said they have looked at new technologies, they still roll out the fibre optic cables, they still roll out the cabinets, and if it's a long way from the cabinet, then it's going to cost a fortune and it's not going to happen. Why are these new technologies not being done by BT? And that's the question I'd like the Minister to answer. Thank you.
Don Woodcock.
Thank you very much, Mr. Pritchard. It's a pleasure to serve under you, and can I add my congratulations to the honourable member for securing this debate. I will be brief because I think the main themes have been very well aired so far, but I want to raise specifically with the Minister the issue of two areas within my constituency that are currently being appallingly served by BT. The first of those is Askham, in fairness, and the second is in Kirby. And I have been deluged by constituents who have just about managed to get internet access in order to send me complaints and emails in advance of this debate, knowing that I was intending to speak at it. Now, in the case of Askham, you have a situation with a particular cabinet, and this will be familiar with, I guess, many of the honourable members here, and the opening speaker gave a good account of BT seeming to shift the goalposts in this issue. They were promised that they were going to get a cabinet, then they were given one excuse of the road around the cabinet being eroded, which if you actually want to come and look, if the Minister wants to come and look at the cabinet, which I'm sure will be high up on his to-do list in the new Parliament, you'll see that excuse is a nonsense. Then they were given a second excuse of there being no private land, there being no land which is not private that is able to cite the cabinet on the new space. Now, when you actually come and look at this, you see that none of these excuses actually hold water, and we have hundreds of people within Askham who are tearing their hair out. Similarly, in Kirby, where the service is actually going backwards very significantly, and BT are not giving any date to fix it. Now, I don't like to have to come and name and shame the company for poor service, but that is, I'm afraid, what is necessary to do in Parliament, given their transience on this issue. Did the member want to come in?
I'll be brief. It might be a solution in the future that at some point we reach a stage where we actually need to have a specific fund for cabinets. Because the problem will be, once this network is laid out, is having cabinets to spur off for local communities.
Well, he makes it. The member makes an interesting suggestion, but as far, and the Minister may want to, we'll look at it, but as far as I'm concerned, and my constituents are concerned, a promise was made by government overall to deliver superfast broadband. A promise was made by BT to facilitate it, and they will hold both of these companies to account, whether a separate fund is created or not. So I don't like to have to bring this up and raise it in Parliament, but we are going to keep banging on about this to the company until they fix this issue. And I hope the Minister can give us some comfort that the government will intervene, if necessary, to try to sort this out.
Congratulate my honourable friend for Boston Skegness. He will not speak to such a full chamber, I suspect, through much of his first term in Parliament, but it does reflect the importance that is attached by all members to this issue. It will not have escaped many honourable friends' notice that I don't have the most rural of constituencies, but there are some very significant issues about superfast broadband in urban areas as well, as the honourable lady for Hackney South and Shoreditch is well aware, because we have addressed this in the last Parliament. Of course.
I believe that I know what the Honourable Gentleman was going to say, and can I, in advance of what he says, despite the fact that he's on the other side of the chamber, say that I'm likely to agree with everything that he says on behalf of my constituents in Islington South, and particularly Tech City.
Just say to Ms Thornbury that you've only just arrived in the chamber. You didn't hear my earlier comments about brevity of interventions and the number of interventions, so I hope next time you might arrive a little bit early in order to hear those. Thank you very much.
I do hope, though, Mr Pritchard, that my intervention was short enough.
Mr Field.
London county councils will have their chance to have their say as well, but may I thank the honourable lady for her kind words. Actually, tempts me to start an entirely different speech, which is going to agree with every word. There are various things I should love to say today. Mr Pritchard, let me just say this. One of the most significant delays in connecting a business or resident, even in the heart of London, to broadband infrastructure is the time taken to negotiate legal permissions that are needed to allow that infrastructure to cross the public highway or to take it into a building, or indeed to get access within a building. And that applies obviously particularly strongly in built-up areas of the United Kingdom. It can take some 18 months for parties to conclude the negotiations, and the usual period is about 8 months. During that time, of course, a broadband provider will not be able to supply that building. Now, to speed up this entire process, the City of London Corporation is leading a group of central London boroughs, including both Islington and Hackney, known as Central London Forward, in a project to produce a standardised agreement for permission to install broadband infrastructure. I'm very pleased to say that the City of Westminster, my other local authority, is also one of the main leaders on this project, and the City and Westminster have invited all the key players, from broadband providers through to the great estates in the West End to major developers across London, to participate. The product of all this activity is to be a standardised agreement known as a way leave that all parties can use as a template for their negotiations. I have no doubt that such a standardised agreement will help to speed up connections to broadband infrastructure, because parties will not have to start their negotiations from scratch. And I want to thank the Minister, because he has played a very leading role in this, for helping to contact the key parties and for his championing of the activities to improve broadband connectivity. I think whilst the Minister can happily quote that Greater London compares favourably with other world cities with an overall 88% level of coverage, this figure is not reflected as well as I should like in the economic heart of the capital or indeed the country. It's not just my constituents who are missing out, but the entire UK economy. And the Minister will appreciate just how important it is that our digital infrastructure in central London doesn't fall behind that of rival global cities. Locally, the approach of BT does seem to be based on a belief that there is insufficient demand to invest further. And so I would share some of the concerns that have already come up during the course of this debate. It means that large swathes of urban areas, as well as the more distant rural parts of this United Kingdom, with important SME users, are very poorly served and restricted to woefully outdated copper broadband. In addition, the EU Commission, of course, are preventing the government, as the Honourable Gentleman of Tiverton pointed out, from subsidising the rollout of superfast broadband in inner cities and beyond. Perversely, this means that remote villages sometimes can have better broadband connections than are available in the heart of my own constituency, containing the political, business and cultural and technological heart of the United Kingdom. I'm afraid to say that this is an issue in part of significant market failure here, and I would be very interested to learn what the Minister is doing to address this problem. I won't say it quite as robustly as was mentioned earlier on. I accept this requires cooperation with internet service providers, with Ofcom and the European Commission. But I really do think that it is time that we stepped up to the plate because this is going to be a very, very big issue. I hope we won't have such a large debate in future because I hope that many of the problems will have been solved. And I look forward to hearing other contributions from all members of the House. But I think it is beholden upon the Minister to recognise this is a very, very real problem, not just for very outlying rural areas. It applies in the heart of our cities as well.
Sue Hayman.
Speak in this debate under your chairmanship. I'm here today, as I'm sure many of the honourable members are, because access to decent broadband is extremely important to both individuals and businesses in my constituency. And has already been said, more and more business transactions are now taking place online, but also in rural areas like mine in Cumbria, banks are also closing their rural branches. So it becomes more important for people to be able to access rural banking. And also children and students are being encouraged to go and get access to online learning resources, and that also becomes more difficult. And another issue that's being talked about in Cumbria is access to doctors through Skype, and of course we can't do that if you don't have decent broadband. I could go on. Connecting Cumbria is managing the rollout of Superfast broadband in Cumbria, which includes my constituency of Workington. It's now successfully delivered phase 1, but we're moving on to phase 2 and hopefully phase 3. But of course, the difficult geography of Cumbria makes this extremely challenging. And what I hope is that the government is going to continue to keep the rollout to rural areas a priority for funding. Because just because outlying areas are considered hard to reach doesn't mean that they should be left behind, and that's what concerns me. And I'm also going to declare a personal interest at this point, as I live in a rural part of Cumbria where the broadband speed is diabolical, to say the least, and I often struggle to open emails and end up giving up. And the problem is not just to do with speed, it's also to do with consistency. It's hugely frustrating when you're online and the broadband connection keeps dropping in and dropping out all the time. Particularly, I mean, I avoid actually doing my banking online at home now because I worry that if it's dropped out when I'm logged into my bank, what are the security issues surrounding that? I'm also spent, most days I have to jog up and down the stairs a few times because my router's upstairs and I need to switch it on, switch it off and try and get connected. It drives me mad. So I fully understand the frustrations of the many constituents. I've not been an MP very long, but I've had many constituents get in touch with me about this, people who are suffering similar problems. And one particular bugbear is the fact that many services and companies are now switching onto online access only. So one thing I want to ask the government and the minister to look at is, can people look at the ability of rural communities to access reliable broadband before making a decision to switch a service to online access only? And I'm going to give a personal experience here. Fairly recently, regarding the Rural Payments Agency. Last year we did it by paper. This year my husband and I were told we had to do it online. So we had the most ridiculous Saturday afternoon trying to complete the application online. This meant not only battling with the poor internet speed, but as my honourable member for Innis Mom mentioned, the mobile signal isn't good. So they then say that you have to input the text code that they've sent you into the system. So I'm running around the garden with the phone, trying to get the code to shout to my husband before the 5 minutes are up so he can input it in. I mean, it is absurd. It's a ridiculous way for us to be carrying on. So just to conclude, because I know you want to keep it short, Mr. Chairman, I really welcome the rollout of Superfast broadband. It's incredibly important to my constituency. But rural areas, as well as areas that we've discussed in more urban areas, must not be disadvantaged. So can I stress again that the government must not assume that we have decent access when they're changing services over to online access only. And please, as we go forward with the rollout, take connectivity into account. Thank you.
Simon Hall.
It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship, and first of all, like others, let me congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Boston and Skegness,
for raising this debate today. I think it's pretty clear by the large attendance here this afternoon that it is a very strong issue in our mailbags and in our inboxes for those who are actually able to email us to send something to our inbox in the first place. It would be, Mr. Chairman, incredibly easy in this debate to just knock BT as effectively a monopoly supplier. I think that would be too easy a goal, and I have to just put on record how very grateful I am, representing a very rural seat in North Dorset, of how available senior executives of BT have been to me in making themselves available to come to this place to have meetings to discuss the future and the service. Because only 43% of North Dorset is covered by superfast broadband. Now, that might seem the Elysian Heights to some honourable members, but 43%, in my judgment, isn't particularly good. And I think we're asking today, or certainly I am, the Minister to consider 3 key points. The first is the huge amount of irritation, and what I actually think to be totally bogus, of de-scoping. I don't think the contractor, in this case BT, should be allowed to de-scope areas which they had previously included in their submissions. I think of De Weston and Stourpane, or Blandford 8 on the Cabinet Box number in my constituency, and Motcombe and Borton served by Shaftesbury 15 and 16. Those have suddenly just been dropped out because suddenly it appeared to be either too difficult or too expensive. And the rules, frankly, should not have allowed the possibility for areas like that, indeed many others, to be dropped out of the scope of the contract. There are third parties who are also, as I understand it, holding up delivery. I understand that there have been some problems with regards to way leaves from both the Forestry Commission and in particular in my constituency from the Crown Estate. And I think if the Minister can use his good offices to bring pressure on those and indeed other executive agencies of the Crown, that would be enormously helpful. We also know, I think, that BT were incredibly heavy-handed in the bidding process. I know from my previous experience as a councillor in Oxfordshire, before being elected to North Dorset, that there was quite a lot of arm-twisting by BT of the county council on which I served to either go totally with BT or that they would not play ball where others were trying to come in and fill in the gaps. That too, I'm saddened to say, was also the experience in North Dorset, where a community-led initiative, Trailway, had wanted to fill in the gap. And BT said very clearly to Dorset County Council, if you support them, if you give them any cause for hope, we are walking away from the delivery of the whole of your county. And that is something, I think, in what we should be trying to see, let us use the old phrase of the big society, where community and rural groups who are well known for their self-sufficiency, their resolve and their resource and ingenuity, they are exactly the sort of people we should be championing. But that is done, and we are where we are. I would ask the Minister to certainly consider putting pressure on any further discussions and negotiations with British Telecom, that where BT have decided not to fill in the gap or the black hole or whatever we care to call it, they must be able to provide all of the relevant data and information to community groups and other providers, such as Wessex Internet in my constituency, who are looking to fill in that gap. With the greatest of pleasure.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend and neighbour for giving way. Does he agree with me that this issue in Dorset is one of the most important in terms of infrastructure, as we heard, in addition to road and rail, that it covers the whole of Dorset, East Dorset, Purbeck and Poole as well, and it's for businesses, tourists and residents alike that we're making this argument today?
Well, prescience of what we might be saying in our speeches, Mr. Chairman, is not just restricted to the Honourable Lady for Islington, because my honourable friend, the member for Mid Dorset and North Poole, takes me neatly on to the other points, because I think it is worthwhile to remind a large company such as BT, and I have little or no doubt that they are listening to this debate this afternoon with keen interest, that for a macro business such as BT, they hold the future of micro businesses very much in their hands. But it's not just business, Mr. Chairman. One thinks of, and other members have spoken of, the importance of broadband connection to our schools and to our colleges.
a primary school in my constituency, Spetsbury, has no access to broadband at all, and no sight of having it either. Other honourable members have spoken of the problem to agriculture, where increasingly we are asking our farmers to make their submissions online, and there are virtually whole swathes of the Blackmore Vale who might as well be trying to write it on vellum with a quill for the amount of speed that they're able to do it with the internet. We've heard about we often call it the superfast bridle path in North Dorset. Businesses such as Gold Hill Organics, an online business in my constituency, an award-winning maze designer in De Weston, all held back significantly from growing their businesses, creating those jobs, bringing those people back to paying tax, getting them off the dole queue, all fundamentally constrained by an inability to access a rapid and reliable, what I think we would all agree is effectively now a basic utility. Tourism and events in a rural area, absolutely key. Pubs with letting rooms like the Talbot at Westminster in my own village, again, held back from growing their business and seeing a return on their investment. BT have done much, they are to be congratulated. We are leading on the European League table. But please don't sacrifice that 5%. Please do not forget the rural areas. And I press again, in closing, Mr Pritchard, those 3 key points I made to the Minister in opening. Thank you.
Mark Williams.
I'd like to also congratulate the Honourable Member for Boston Skegness for initiating this really important debate. And I'd certainly, you'll be relieved, Mr Pritchard, to hear that the carefully crafted 10-minute speech will be jettisoned and compacted into 2 or 3 minutes, I hope. But firstly, it would be churlish not to acknowledge the great progress that has been made, the additional 2.5 million homes and businesses that have been linked up to superfast broadband as of May. But much talk has been of that last 5% and the peripheral areas, and I want to talk about the peripheral area that I represent, very much in the spirit of my honourable friend from Ynysmore and his experiences there. In terms of broadband speed, internet speed, Ceredigion ranks 646 out of 650 constituencies for internet speed. Superfast broadband is available to 12% of my constituency, ranking at 639th out of 650. So when we reflect on phase 3 of the rollout, I'd like to know from the Minister what timetable are we now operating, because like other honourable members, I have a great deal of impatient businesses and householders in my constituency. The EFRA Select Committee, now I have to say, in incredibly safe hands on this issue from the honourable member for Tiverton and Honiton after that great speech earlier on. I say that in the spirit as a former coalition member, but I genuinely mean that. They said in February that they wanted a timescale for the final rollout of phase 3, and we anticipate the response from the Minister on that. I'd also be interested in finding out the outcome of the research and trials which have been taking place into phase 3. It is a case, the necessity of those new technologies in order to get to those, in my case, scattered communities which make up the bulk of my constituency. Now, the critical thing for me is the issue of businesses and the development of a rural economy. And reliable internet access has been identified by small businesses themselves, 94% of them, as absolutely essential. Ofcom recently called for lower prices for high-speed business lines, which will be welcome news for many of my constituents, or the few of them that can access high speed. But of course, the technology needs to be available in the first place. Many of my businesses are genuinely struggling. 2 weeks ago, the Goma Press in Llandyssil in the south of Ceredigion, a printing firm, a very historic printing firm, a growing business, approached me, still having genuine concerns with BT that the speeds they are receiving is harming their business, as they simply cannot, as they struggle, to receive the required files in order to undertake the printing work required of them. Like the Honourable Member for Dorset North, who talked about tourism. That is a growing area in West Wales. The hotel, the Conra Hotel in my constituency, I commend it to the Minister. It's a good 4-star hotel if he's coming to West Wales to come there. Its owner, Mr Hughes, tells me that whilst his broadband is provided by BT, the service is so shockingly bad that most of his clientele, when they arrive there, are reluctant to come back because of the inadequate broadband. We are letting down key businesses in rural peripheral areas, key businesses which have a huge impact. I'd also just reflect on, again, those other issues, those increasing number of requirements of our constituents to undertake business online. A constituent wrote to me last week, the new DVLA regulations for a digital counterpart driving licence. How can this be possible in an area where they are not able to access the digital component? Not to mention, as others have mentioned, the number of members of the farming community who come to us with genuine concerns that they cannot undertake what's required of them, reporting cattle movements to BCMS, online completion of single farm payments, the checking of market prices. They're just some of the problems that farmers face, as well as small businesses having to undertake electronic verification of VAT returns. I think of one particular constituent who was required to register his tax returns, was fined because he was unable to do so, was then told we managed to get the money back for him. He was told he could register a paper submission. And then when the note came back, was also told the farmer should next time go down to the local library where there would be a broadband connection to register his tax returns. Now, I would challenge any member of this House to go to one of the marts in my constituency and tell a farmer to go and register his tax returns online. They would get a very spirited response. This is a matter of necessity. It is a matter of urgency. And following the stipulation from the Chair, we need some immediate action on this.
Ms. Organi.
I make my remarks, I must declare an interest. My husband is Director of Policy at the broadband provider Sky. I want to congratulate the Honourable Member for securing this debate so soon as his time as the Member for Boston and Skegness. Broadband is no longer a luxury, Mr Chairman. It is a vital necessity for my small businesses, for my farming community and for my families at home. Access to the internet and all that it has to offer is a core requirement of day-to-day life. Yet in many places, particularly in rural areas, such as my constituency of Wilden, people have to contend with limited choice of service providers, slow speeds, regular service blackouts and general unreliability. My Wilden constituents should not be having to put up with this in 2015. I have received a number of complaints from constituents about their broadband services, demonstrating how lives can be blighted by broadband difficulties. I just want to share two examples with you. A local mum, a businesswoman, runs her own business and contacted me about a service blackout which left her without internet connection for 19 days. Can you imagine, Mr Chairman, trying to run a business without internet for 19 days? This is not, though, going to be solved by a rollout of superfast broadband in the short term, because it is a problem with the access network, something taken for granted by those pining for an upgrade to the superfast network, but which some of my constituents can only dream of. Any superfast rollout cannot be at the expense of investment in the access network. Another constituent whose house is connected to the RIPE exchange, not currently enabled for fibre service, is in the dark over any possible upgrade. BT's website shows his area will be online within 6 months. But, Mr Chairman, that notice has been on the website for 12 months already. My constituent has not been given a provisional timetable by BT, by BD UK or the local council detailing when the negotiations will be brought to a conclusion, never mind when any upgrade that may finally happen. BT and BD UK must become much more transparent.
I commend to her North Lincolnshire Council, who have done an amazing job of ensuring at every single step of the way residents know what happens. As a result, take-up is way in excess of what was expected, and that's in stark contrast to my other council, the East Riding of Yorkshire, where the communication with the public has been woeful at times. So she's absolutely right that it can be done if local authorities and BT have the desire to do this, and it should be done so residents know when they're going to get their upgrade.
Example, thank you. Beyond the impact on businesses, there is an impact on older people too. I am pleased to be the new co-chair of the all-party parliamentary group on ageing and older people, and addressing ageing and loneliness is a priority of mine. The speed at which technology is changing is frightening for the best of us, but for older people it can be truly isolating. Making sure that they have access to the internet is just not an economic or technological issue, but a social care issue. We cannot let anyone be left behind or left out. This government and the previous government have made encouraging steps with respect to broadband provision. The £1.7 billion being invested is welcome, as is the fact that according to Countryside Alliance, 90% of premises will be connected by early 2016. My concern is that the other 10% are not left behind, and while rolling out superfast broadband, the responsibility to deliver basic broadband to those who fall beyond the limits of BD UK project are not overlooked.
Would you give way? Thank you. As a neighbour in Bexhill and Battle, sharing a border as we do, would my honourable friend agree that with 15% of our local residents being self-employed and over half of our residents working for small firms, that this is even more of an issue for us in East Sussex for the government to get right?
My honourable member is absolutely right. Most of my businesses employ fewer than 10 people. That's 90% of my businesses, and they tend to be run out of their own homes. So having rural broadband, whether it's slow or fast speed, is absolutely imperative. Thank you. The government predicts that by 2017, 95% of premises will benefit from speeds of more than 24 megabytes. Some of my constituents are just asking for 2 of those, and they're not even getting that. The Broadband Connection Voucher Scheme, which allows businesses a grant of up to £3,000 for better and faster broadband, is also welcome. But, Mr Chairman, this scheme does not help my constituents one little bit. It is for the moment limited to the businesses located within a certain distance of the 50 cities currently benefiting from the scheme. I hope the government will consider expanding its horizons and work to support these businesses.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I would like to thank the honourable member for Boston and Skegness for bringing this debate this afternoon. I think it's been an absolutely fascinating debate. It's clearly an issue which affects all of us in this chamber that have issues of making sure that we have effective broadband. I was particularly drawn to the comments by the honourable member of Innismore of the difficulties that he faces in his rural constituency, one I can share in Roskilde and Lochaber as well.
One of the big problems, of course, in the rural areas, and the honourable member for Boston and Skegness spoke about 4G and 5G filling in the gap where we can't get fibre broadband. In my constituency in Eddisbury, we don't even get a 2G signal in large parts of it. And it is the failure of the mobile companies acting in concert that is a real issue, because that option is simply not available.
I thank the honourable lady for her intervention, and I absolutely agree with her. And I think when we're talking about the kind of solutions that we need to deliver in the rural area, you cannot look at broadband in isolation, and we need to look at the opportunities that mobile telephony will provide as well. And you're absolutely right. It's not just the failure of broadband, it's the failure of mobile connectivity. Now, I had a meeting, just to add some weight to that, with members of my business community in Lochaber and Fort William last week. And there are 4 quite significant employers there. Marine Harvest, for example, is a fish farming business that have great difficulty in connecting at any level with their fish farms around the constituency. And that adds additional cost to that business. The same is true of Ferguson's, a transport company. Additional costs of having to spy satellite phones in order that they can connect with their drivers. That's the kind of cost that I think that the honourable member for Innismore was talking about, of being in the more disadvantaged parts of the country. And it's something I think that we have to work cross-party to make sure... Well, I will in a second, but I just want to finish this point, because I think there will be opportunities when 5G comes to the table, I believe, in 2016. And we need to make sure that there is a competitive advantage, I would argue, for the rural areas that comes as a consequence of that. We should make sure that the rural communities are at the front of the queue, not at the back of the queue. I give away.
Technologies. Many villagers have come to me to say, couldn't BT look at fibre to the root node options, which can join up 30 properties, small groups of properties, to a smaller cabinet. And they're having this method on trial, but they won't bring it off the trial to put it into practice. I would ask the Minister in particular to consider why not. Can we try some other methods?
Well, again, I appreciate the intervention. I was going to come on to that in my own remarks a little bit later on, because there is clearly the issue, particularly in rural areas, of the distances from the cabinet, that the degradation of speeds that you're going to get means when we talk about superfast broadband being delivered, the reality is it's not. And
And so the issue of nodes, the issue of looking at satellite in rural areas, all these things have to be looked at if we are determined to get this right. Now, I know that time is marching on, so I'm going to delete a lot of the remarks that I was going to make. But I will say that my honourable friend, if I could call him that, in the Scottish Parliament, John Swinney, wrote to the Minister of Culture and Digital Economy, Ed Vaizey, in March 2015, calling for the introduction of a universal service obligation for broadband, which would ensure that everyone in Scotland and elsewhere in the UK can access affordable, high-speed broadband. The UK currently has a telecoms universal service obligation, which entitles every property in the UK to a telephone line. However, this doesn't contain any meaningful provision for broadband, and it should. A broadband universal service obligation working alongside significant Scottish Government investments would help address the digital divide and ensure that everyone in Scotland can access broadband services regardless of where they live. All, regardless of location, deserve to benefit from the opportunities that connectivity brings. A recent report by the Boston Consulting Group stated that internet-related activity in the UK accounted for 8.3% of GDP in 2010, and a forecast that this contribution will increase to 12.4% by 2016. Data traffic worldwide is exploding, growing at a compound rate of 23%. It is clear that in order to be able to compete, that our infrastructure on connectivity has to be fit for purpose. Many UK cities are seeing the development of fibre rings that will deliver speeds of up to 1 gigabit. Cities such as Peterborough, York and Coventry, as well as Aberdeen and Edinburgh in Scotland. The leader of Peterborough Council stated that the development there was the most important event in Peterborough since the arrival of the railway. I would tend to agree with this, and I welcome the opportunities that superfast broadband that businesses and consumers will benefit from in these cities. But it does raise a challenge in making sure that we can deliver appropriate connectivity in the rural areas. I and my colleagues in the SNP from rural constituencies look forward to working with honourable members from other parties who face the same challenges as we do. The report from the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs Select Committee, published in January of this year on rural broadband and digital-only services, graphically points to the challenges and the opportunities that have to be met. As the last sentence of the summary states, it is vital that the last premises in the UK have to have access to basic and superfast broadband are treated in the same way as the first premises and are not left behind or forgotten. There are particular challenges with incumbent technology being fibre to the cabinet, and the ultimate connection is by copper wire, and consequently the degradation of broadband speeds that we talked about. As the report states, fibre to the cabinet is not a suitable solution in every circumstance or for every community, means that alternative solutions such as wider satellite coverage or fibre to the node are necessary. Alternative solutions are required not only to ensure that the current commitment to basic and superfast broadband are met, but also to ensure that the infrastructure being deployed is future-proof and able to meet demands for increasing broadband speeds. Mr Chairman, it is in this context that the plans for next-generation capabilities, and in particular 5G, are critical. We need to have a debate about how effective mobile coverage in rural areas and how technologies such as 5G could allow us to deliver efficient and effective broadband capabilities. The kind of opportunities that the connected cities will have, as I mentioned earlier, means I believe that the Government has to consider how we create competitive opportunities in rural areas. I and my party welcome much of the improvements.
That inviting in other providers of technology is an option, but it is one that can prejudice the access to the government's money by showing that there's no market failure. And that will leave behind a legacy of high costs for the individual in the provision of broadband.
Well, I think it's a reasonable point that the gentleman makes, and I know that certainly in the context of Scotland, and looking at what we did in both the Highland and rural areas and what was done in the urban areas, that we did suffer from the fact that there was no other potential provider other than BT. So yes, we need to make sure that there are people that can provide these kind of services at the right kind of cost, whether it's in Scotland or whether it's in the rest of the UK. In conclusion, Mr Chairman, I and my party welcome much of the improvements that are being delivered today in both urban and in rural UK. There is, however, more that has to be done in order that everyone can share in the opportunities that superfast broadband can deliver. Mr Bryan, thank
you very much, Mr Pritchard. As you know, some are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them, and I've never quite worked out which it is with you. But it is an enormous delight to... I missed that, I'm glad to say.
The minister's said enough. Minister. No, I'm kidding.
Fortunately, Mr. Pritchard, you cannot have a division in this committee room, so we can't put that to the test. It's a great delight to have this debate this afternoon, and it's a great delight to see that the chamber is so full, and it's fairly unusual. And I think that's because the honourable member has chosen absolutely the right subject. I do congratulate the honourable member for Boston and Skegness and look forward to hearing a great deal more of him. I hope he'll be a little less opaque about BT Openreach in the future. He's not a journalist anymore. He's allowed to say what he thinks, even if there are whips listening in. I think an awful lot of members now have significant concerns and will watch Ofcom's inquiry into how this is rolling out, the relationship between BT and Openreach, very carefully, because we want to make sure that there is fair and open competition out there, but we don't want to dismantle a company just for the sake of some kind of prejudice or other. He referred to this being the most important infrastructure rollout of his life. Well, I hope he's going to have a long and fruitful life, and who knows what the future may bring. But I would just say to him that in my constituency, the rollout of mobile has been just as complicated and difficult. I know this because when I wrote a letter demanding that Tony Blair stand down as Prime Minister, fortunately, I had no mobile coverage in my house, and so no journalists were able to get me for at least 4 days. But I think the point has been well made by many honourable members that peripheral economies come in many different shapes and sizes, and all too often, as my honourable friend for Anglesey said, the infrastructure problems that you have in relation to broadband are also infrastructure problems in relation to physical access and roads and buses and transport and everything else. I can't hear what the honourable lady is saying, but it's devolved. I'm not sure what devolution has to do with this particular issue, but the point I'm making... If the honourable member wants to make a contribution, I'm sure he might catch your eye later, sir, if I sit down. The honourable member for Anglesey made several points, and he said that the market isn't working. I think one of the concerns that many have expressed in the debate today is a right one, which is quite how we have assessed state aid and market failure. I'm not sure that it's really delivered the significant outcomes that we'd all like to have achieved for the significant amount of money that the government has been putting in. The honourable member for Tiverton and Honiton gave what I can only describe as a Julius Caesar speech. I come to bury Vasey, not to praise him, I think was the basic tenor of the speech. And I think he made his points better than I will. So I'm not going to make them again. My honourable friend for Barrow and Furness he has consistently, throughout the last Parliament, made these points affecting his constituents, and he's absolutely right to do so. It's good that he can now get emails on this matter, even if many in his constituency still find it difficult to get superfast broadband. The honourable member for the cities of London and Westminster, I know most of these constituencies have two names in them. There are a few that are quite as concise as Rhondda. But he, unlike the member for Rhondda, he made the point, an important one, which is this is not just about rural constituencies. In fact, some of the most intractable problems relate to cities. Just an instance is the south bank of the Thames, where all the cabling runs along in and out the side of the river, which makes for very difficult contention rates along long copper wires, which still, in many cases, haven't yet been resolved. So he's absolutely right. If he doesn't mind, I think we do want to hear from the Minister fairly soon. So I'm tempted to want to try and stop sooner. But, oh, right, he's very beguiling.
The honourable gentleman is characteristically generous and courteous in giving way. While some honourable members have quite rightly ensured that urban broadband has not been neglected in this debate, would he nevertheless agree with me that it's vital we retain a focus and determination to prioritise coverage in villages such as Seagrave and Thrussington in my constituency and rural not spots?
Well, since the Rhondda is often described as semi-rural or semi-urban, I'm quite happy to both agree with him and his next-door neighbour there, which is a bit, having one's cake and eating it. But these points are well made. I mean, in the end, the universality is what we're trying to achieve, and that's what we're not achieving as yet. The honourable member for Dorset North, I think he made a very worrying point about BT's aggressive bidding process. And I hope that BT will have, I'm sure they will have heard that. I'm sure there's somebody sitting at the back there from BT or watching it on television or on broadband. Who knows, maybe they've got Superfast. But he's absolutely right, and he was right to talk about filling in the gap. The Honourable Member for Ceredigion has one of the worst sets of problems of this of all constituencies, 646 in the land, and his points are well made, and I hope the Minister will be able to answer them. The Honourable Member for Wealdon was absolutely right. Sorry, I've not referred to my Honourable Member from Workington, who, a new colleague, but like many others already raising matters that are of significant concern to her constituents, and I'm sure she will continue to do so. We hope to hear from the Minister on it. The Honourable Member for Wealdon made very important points about the access network, and sometimes we get because we politicians are not necessarily experts in every aspect of the technology here, we sometimes get focused on broadband speeds to the detriment of some of the other aspects of competition that also affect this area, this subject. I was slightly nervous about an SNP member sitting behind me, at my back, as it were, the member for Skye and Lochaber, and I was suddenly, I kept on thinking of Andrew Marvell. Always at my back I hear the SNP horribly near. But he made some very important points, and I look forward, if he sort of acts as my kind of PPS, that would be very helpful in these debates. Mr Pritchard, we all agree on the centrality of superfast broadband. It is absolutely clear. For home entertainment, many people now watch their television, including, ironically enough, since much of this has been funded out of the licence fee, their BBC through iPlayer. But also upstairs there might be children watching television programmes or other bits of television or audiovisual, playing audiovisual games on their tablets, using Spotify and so on. The NHS relies on it not only for the booking of appointments, but for passing notes from doctors to hospitals and for the examination of x-rays, often in other parts of the world. Schools have already been referred to, children being able to do their homework. And of course, increasingly, the DWP wants to move to a model where everything is done through the internet, which will require superfast broadband and reliable superfast broadband connections. I would also argue that especially in a country such as ours, where the creative industries now represent 1 in 12 jobs in this country, and where we add value and where we can guarantee our economic future by supporting our creative industries, the superfast broadband of speeds of at least 24 megabits per second, and I suspect considerably further in the future, this is going to be important to our economic future. It is, in a sense, a utility as important and as essential as electricity is. And we all agree that some significant progress has been made. But I think the symbolic fact that there are so many members here of all political parties is an indication that from our constituencies we have to say to the Minister that not enough progress has been made. Phase 1 and Phase 2 of their project is aiming to get to 95% of all premises by 2017. I originally thought that was the beginning of 2017. Well, since the government had originally said it was by May 2015, that was a legitimate expectation. But actually the government is now talking by the end of 2017 for that target. And the Honourable Lady for Edisbury, I think I'm right, she referred to the fact that some people still can't even get the 2 megabits per second. And that is really, I mean, that is a dramatic problem for people running the most basic of businesses that have to relate to the wider world, because everybody has at least a website and some means of getting in touch with the business online. And our original target was 2012. That hasn't been met. And I think the government does bear a measure of responsibility in this. I noticed earlier that Honourable Member for Boston referred earlier to Prime Minister's questions. Well, I heard the Prime Minister say many, many times, refer to the mobile infrastructure project. £150 million devoted to it. It's meant to get to 60,000 properties. And so far, it's got to just 1% of those in 3 years. So I think that sometimes the kind of hands-off approach has not been suitable.
Before I call the Minister, the new standing orders for Westminster Hall debates have changed. If members haven't seen it, I encourage you to read it. That means Matt Warman is entitled for a wind-up, but that is subject to the Minister allowing time. Minister.
Oh, OK. Well, thank you very much, Mr Pritchard. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I say that to all the chairmen, but in your case, I really mean it. And I know that you have your own experience of the broadband rollout programme because, of course, your Labour Council refused to take part in the Phase 1 programme, but having seen how successful Phase 1 has been, I gather they've now set up to take part in Phase 2, and that is down to the explicit actions of the brilliant Conservative MPs in that area in persuading the Labour Council to come on board this programme and connect 8,000 premises that otherwise wouldn't have been connected. I don't know whether to congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Boston and Skegness, for this debate, but I suppose I should say thank you that he's brought so many friends and colleagues here to support me this afternoon on what is a complex and difficult programme. But I would certainly thank him for the email he circulated earlier today. You may be interested to know that in my own county of Lincolnshire, BT's rollout is ahead of schedule and well under budget. And I think that is true in many areas. A brief history of time on behalf of my honourable friends. Everyone knows that when we came into government, there was no plan from the previous Labour government to help get broadband out. They talked about a 2 megabit. They talked about a 2 megabit commitment for the end of 2012. They'd done nothing to put in place any commitment. The Right Honourable Member for Surrey South West quite rightly took the decision that we had to push further. We had to go for superfast broadband from the get-go, because he knew full well that if we did a 2 megabit rollout, I might be able to stand up in this chamber today and say you'd all got 2 megabits, and all honourable members would be screaming for superfast broadband. So he made the right decision there. We set out that Phase 1 would get to 90% of UK premises, and I had to appear on many occasions with the former chairman of the Public Accounts Committee after various National Audit Office reports telling me we weren't going to make that target. Indeed, I recall some journalists in the sector thought that the target was stretching too far and couldn't be achieved. But lo and behold, by the end of 2015 or early 2016 at the latest, we will have reached our target of 90% of UK premises. In fact, very shortly we'll announce that we'll have passed 3 million premises around the country. We're passing 40,000 premises a week. This is a complex engineering job. It doesn't involve simply turning up at the doorstep and flicking on a switch. It involves putting in a cabinet. That cabinet needs power. That cabinet is expensive. And then obviously you have to run fibre from that cabinet back to the exchange. All of that requires highways. All of that requires planning. All of that requires power. I'll give way to the Honourable Lady.
For giving way, and he will also be aware that the Public Accounts Committee called for further information available, provided by both local government and BT, including critically information about the speed of service. Is he content that his department has met that target?
Well, if you go on to Go Superfast, the website provided by the government, you can type in your postcode and you will find out whether you have BT OpenReach accessibility, which obviously gives you accessibility to both Sky and TalkTalk and other over-the-top providers, or indeed Virgin Media accessibility. It is important to remember that this is an engineering project, and some of the engineering tasks that have been achieved, for example, getting fibre to the Scilly Isles, rank with some of the most complex engineering phases that have gone in this country. I'm not going to go through every single speech, because all of them, let me tell you, were brilliant. But there were a lot of them. But let me just take two quick examples. For example, the Honourable Member for Innismarn talked about the need for rural areas to come first. But his constituency is a classic example of where this scheme matters. Because under commercial superfast broadband, precisely no premise in his constituency was due to get commercial broadband, not from BT, nor from any of the rivals who often say they could do the job better, because they didn't feel there was the economic investment. 93% of his constituents will get superfast broadband under this scheme, and that includes you can be snarky about it, but that is the fact that under this superfast broadband scheme, that is what is being delivered. But that is also what we're up against. When you deliver superfast broadband to opposition members, they don't want to give you any credit. My honourable friend, the member for Tiverton and Honiton, spoke with great passion, I think it's fair to say, and asked what I was doing to help him. Well, this morning I had another meeting with BD UK to discuss getting the Connecting Devon and Somerset contract signed, and I have meetings like that all the time to bring local authorities together with BT. But what have we done already? £110 million provided for Devon and Somerset, 143,000 premises passed, 300,000 premises will be passed at the end. I give way to the honourable member.
I recognise the huge improvements that have been made and the manifesto commitment to roll out ultra-fast broadband to premises as soon as possible. But are we being ambitious enough? Australia are delivering 100 meg broadband to 93% of premises by 2021. Finland, 100 meg by 2015. South Korea, 1 gigabyte by 2017. According to an LSE report, the government investment...
I've got the point from my honourable friend. I'm running out of time, but I'll tell him that we're being ambitious enough for him because we support him, and that's why 100% of Torbay is going to get superfast broadband under our scheme. And that is why... Sorry, I got the wrong name. I heard the chairman give the wrong name.
Just before the Minister moves on to complete his comments, there's been a lot of talk about rollout, not so much talk about take-up. And before he sits down, could he refer to the fact that in parts of Wales, take-up of this fantastic scheme is still in the low 20s, and that's not... everybody seems to think it's somebody else's problem. The Minister could clear that up.
I will clear that up. Take-up is extremely important. The good thing about take-up is that it brings back it brings money back into the scheme. So, for example, the money that was set aside to get superfast broadband to Cornwall was only going to get to 80%, but because of the large take-up in Cornwall, we've reached 95%. The honourable member whose constituency I got spectacularly wrong, forgive me, mentioned other jurisdictions. He'll be pleased to know that the last Australian government lost the election because their broadband plans were so poor, and if he believes that that is what's going to happen in Australia, I think he has to think again, because they're busily trying to revise their broadband programme because it was far too expensive and was going to deliver far too late. But all of my honourable friends will have the notes from the library, which puts us, in terms of the big five in the EU, first in almost every single category. You may not have seen the analysis published today by Enders Analysis, which puts us again at the top in terms of access to speeds of 30 megabits, beating the Germans, beating the French, beating the Italians, beating the Spanish, and again in terms of our average internet connection speed. And because the scheme has been so successful, that's why we've gone on to phase 2. That's why we're going to 95%. That's why we've signed almost every single contract, apart from Devon and Somerset, which we're going to sign, I hope, on Friday. And we'll sign almost every single contract by the end of this month. And that means we can get on and start planning to get to 95%. I give way to my honourable friend.
My honourable friend said the cabinets were expensive. In the European Commission report by Oxera on the evaluation of the UK scheme, there's a chart on page 4.5 that says how expensive the cabinets are. Unfortunately, Mr. Pritchard, it's blank. It's been edited out. I happen to have got a hold of it, and it looks like they're a lot cheaper than BT has been saying, and in particular, that when Olivia Garfield, the former head of Openreach, said on the 13th of December 2013 in Strike Up Broadband that BT cabinets cost £100,000, she was, to use a technical term, talking crap, was she not?
Well, I don't know whether that word is a technical term or not. What I do know is that in my honourable friend's constituency, some 33,000 premises will be delivered thanks to this plan, and he'll also know that both the National Audit Office and the Public Accounts Committee have validated the value for money for this broadband scheme. He'll also know that we don't pay BT, no contractor pays BT until the work is done. The money is not paid in advance, the money is paid when BT presents invoices, and he will know that this scheme is audited regularly. So phase 2 is going ahead. The next stage, and this is the theme of my honourable friend's debate today, is no one should be left behind. What are we going to do about phase 3? The key point about phase 3, that last 5%, is we don't know how much it will cost. Back-of-the-envelope costings can run into the billions. We need a proper figure. That is why we've launched these pilots. Some of these pilots are already delivering broadband connections to people all over the country. But better still, they're giving an idea of what kind of technologies we can use to get to the 5%. That will include other suppliers apart from BT, and it will include other technologies which BT is also using, but others are using, such as wireless, such as satellite as well. And that will take us to phase 3. And honourable members have talked about businesses. We don't want to leave businesses behind. That's why we've launched our very successful business voucher scheme, which has delivered 25,000 vouchers. We announced that this morning. 25,000 small businesses in cities up and down the country have accessed Superfast broadband scheme. Better still, there is now more competition in the market. Virgin Media, £3 billion announced of investment because of the success of our scheme. TalkTalk announcing its 1 gigabit offer in York and going to roll out to other cities. BT itself has invested £3 billion of its own money. And let's not forget, we have the fastest 4G rollout and take-up anywhere in the world. I give way to my honourable friend.
I was simply going to ask if you could give clarity on the timing on Phase 3 and the final 5%.
We hope to have to set out our proposals on Phase 3 later this year. We want to do some detailed work. We're working up a scheme, a series of proposals at the moment. We're going to look at those in some detail and hopefully present them and take them forward. But there are, obviously, it is a very, very complex issue. And let us not forget what we are talking about here are the most difficult to reach premises, which will be the most expensive to reach, but we do want to reach them, and that is why we will carry out the scheme. So this is an unequivocal success story. I look forward to coming together again with all my honourable friends and honourable colleagues when we announce that we've reached the milestone of 3 million. It may be during the summer recess, so I'll invite you all to a suitable seaside resort to join me to make that announcement and release some balloons. Or you may want to put out press releases in your own constituency telling your constituents what a hugely successful scheme this is. But I don't want to be flippant or facetious. We have not forgotten those who need broadband. The tone of this debate is absolutely right. We are at a critical point where the engineering scheme that we are rolling out is meeting the almost universal demand now from our constituents to receive broadband. And I know as a constituency MP that those who get broadband under the scheme don't always say thank you.
Order.
Those that don't
Order.
make a noise.
Minister.